Today, I'm going to be ranking every single Red Dead Redemption 2 camp in a tier list, starting from the worst camps and going all the way up to the best camps. 99% of my viewers are unsubscribed, so if you'd like to see more content like this, subscribe, as I'll be posting tier lists every single day. In last place, I've got Guarma. Guarma is the worst camp easily by far. There are some cool places you can go in Guarma, but I feel like there's not really much going on in Guarma. You can't really go to a town or do anything like general store wise or like going to the gunsmith or anything. There's not much camaraderie within the camp. It's like Bill, Micah, Javier, Dutch, and you. So you don't really get that same vibe you get with some of these other camps, and just like it's a rundown area, and I think there's just not much going on there, and I feel like you have to put it in last place no matter what. There's not much going on here. It's a pretty depressing chapter because you don't have a lot of people here and you're with the worst characters in the whole game, so I think I have to put it in last place, and it's also going to be going in F tier. In 8th place, I have Lakay. Lakay is a weird place you have to go to. It's a weird camp. It's only there for like 2 missions, but I think it is better than Guarma just because it's actually on the mainland and you can like kind of do stuff in a camp. And I mean, you do get that cool mission with the Pinkertons, even though that's not really part of the camp, but at least a lot of other people are there, and it's a lot more like there's more camaraderie between everyone, even though everyone's just kind of packing and going immediately. I think also just because it's on the mainland really gives it so much more of a boost from Guarma, because Guarma you can't do anything at all, and at least in Lakay, even though you're only there for 2 missions, there's a lot to do and you can just be going around and doing a lot of stuff. And while there's not a lot to do in Lakay, everyone's moving out immediately as soon as they're getting in. It's just a little bit better in my opinion. It's not that much better, but I think Lakay has to go in D tier. It's kind of an interesting camp, but it's nothing special in my opinion. In 7th place, I've got Pronghorn Ranch. Pronghorn Ranch, I don't really know if you want to call it a camp. I think I would, just according to this video, but I think it is in maybe a more interesting spot than Lakay is. Lakay is the 3rd swamp thing in a row, the 3rd swamp camp in a row. And while this isn't really a camp, you can't really have the same interactions you do in a camp. At least it's there for a couple more missions, and there are some interactions you can have with the other people that work on the ranch with you. So I don't know, it's interesting, and there's at least like a lot of missions right there, and like I think it's just because it's there for a little bit longer than Lakay, I have to give this slight edge above Lakay, but I don't really think it's that much better than Lakay. I think Lakay kind of just suffers from a bit of fatigue, where it's like you have a bunch of like these Lemoyne camps in a row, and you just can't really get out of Lemoyne, and then you eventually get to leave at the end of the Lakay chapter, and it's only there for 2 missions, so there's not really that much like actual nostalgia with going back to Lakay. In 6th place, I have to have Colter. Colter is, I feel like, a better camp than the last 2. I feel like there's a little bit better of a vibe. You're there for a couple more missions than Lakay, and it's pretty close to Pronghorn Ranch, but I think restricting you on the map size really hurts it. I mean, I feel like you'd have to go a little bit higher if you could actually explore the whole map, but since you can't, it has to be D tier, and I think it really holds back Colter from being probably one of the better camps. I feel like everyone here is a little bit more happy, and they're all kind of in these houses together, like everyone's kind of packed together, so I feel like it works a little bit better with the camaraderie and everything. And I just think, I don't know, it's an interesting little area. I think it works better than Lakay or Pronghorn Ranch, but just because you can't explore the map, it really hurts Colter a lot, and it holds it back from being a pretty solid, maybe B tier option. But because you can't explore the map, it has to go D tier to me. In 5th place, I've got Beaver Hollow. I just think because this is the end of the game, it kind of hurts the actual camaraderie of the camp, and everyone's kind of getting down on each other and getting mad at each other. People start leaving at the end of the chapter, so that also takes away from a lot of this. And while there are some interesting camp interactions, I don't really think it has the same ability, and especially because it's in the corner of the map. It's right next to Annesburg, which I feel like is kind of a terrible town, and it's just away from all these things. You have to ride out so far to get to like Valentine and to go to some of these missions. I mean, I feel like a lot of the missions are camped up on that side, but I don't think it's as interesting as some of these other camps are, and I just think the location kind of sucks. So Beaver Hollow really, I mean, it's good because chapter 6 is cool, and I think the location is probably one of the like more interesting actual geographical locations because of the whole cave, and you can go all the way in, and like the Murphy brood was there. Like, I don't know, there's some cool things in the actual camp in the area, the geographical part of it, but it doesn't really have that same geographical location part because it's right next to Annesburg. So I think I'll have to put it in B tier. In fourth place, I've got Beechers Hope. Beechers Hope is probably, I don't know, it's probably one of my more favorite locations, even though it's not in the best location. I think Blackwater and New Austin, that's like, it's in the left of the map if you don't count New Austin. I feel like New Austin is pretty desolate, so you can't really count it, but it is in a place where you kind of haven't explored. Before that, you can't explore Blackwater and that whole area, and then you have to explore like New Austin after the fact in the epilogue. But I think the fact that you actually build this house yourself really puts it a little bit higher. Even though there isn't that same camp camaraderie you have with all these other people, you do have Charles and Uncle and Abigail and Jack there, at least for a little bit of time. Charles eventually does leave, but like, you have people that you can annoy or just antagonize or greet or whatever you want to call. You can do whatever you want with those people, and I feel like that kind of makes it a little bit more fun than some of these other locations. And even though it doesn't have that same camp area to it, I still think it works. And I think just the fact that you built this house with your own hands, kind of with your own fingers, jamming that controller down or jamming those keys down, I feel like it works a little bit to build up the character of the house. And I think it's just like a kind of fun place, especially when you get to hang out with Charles and Uncle for a little bit. But I think because it's in the corner map, it kind of takes away, and it doesn't have that same nostalgic feel as I feel like these top three do. Also going in the A tier, I have to put Shady Belle here. Shady Belle is probably one of my more favorite camps. I think actually living in a house is kind of interesting, but I think living in the swamp the same as Clemons Point, which, I mean, I feel like the vibes of these two locations are a little different. Shady Belle is a lot more swamp, and Clemons Point is a little bit more like right in between the swamp. But I think them both being in Lemoyne kind of takes a little bit away from Shady Belle. I mean, I think also the location of Shady Belle sucks. It's right next to Saint Denis, which is always great, but the rest of the map is really just off to you. And I feel like in this actual chapter, you just only spend time in Saint Denis. You can't really go anywhere else. I mean, I guess you could go to Rhodes, or you could technically explore the rest of the map, but like when you're actually in the game, I feel like I was only in Saint Denis at this point. It's the Saint Denis chapter, so I don't know. It really just kind of had me in a certain area of the map, and while I think that's also a benefit in its own way, I feel like it really took away from the overall ability to be in Shady Belle. And I think while Shady Belle is also a house, I feel like the vibes are a little bit down from like chapter 2 and 3, while there's still a lot of camaraderie, especially when you take back Jack and everyone's just drinking and stuff. I feel like those are some of the most fun times. You just get to hear stories from other people, especially when you're playing through the game multiple times. Those are some like the most fun times of the whole game. But I don't know. I feel like Shady Belle's location has to be taking away a lot from the actual game mechanics of this, because it's so far away, and I don't want to go back to Shady Belle, because it's like that's when the game starts really going deeper, and it stops taking away from these fun vibes of the last two camps. So this one has to go in A tier. It's definitely a really fun camp to be in, but it's not my favorite. In second place, I've got Clemons Point. I feel like Clemons Point has to be one of the more fun areas to be in. I feel like the nice and spread out look of Clemons Point is cool, and the fact that you actually get to find Clemons Point and like take it away from the raiders is pretty cool. But I think Clemons Point really can't be number one, just because I feel like the vibes are a little bit off here. You're going down to Lemoyne, and everyone's not really familiar with Lemoyne, and while you are really close to Rhodes, you can't shoot around Rhodes in chapter 3. I feel like that takes away a little bit from like the fun of being in Rhodes. So while Clemons Point is definitely an amazing camp, I feel like there's a lot of fun missions that go on in this one. There's a lot of camaraderie between everyone. Everyone wants to scam these stupid rednecks, the Braithwaites and the Grays, out of their money. Everyone's kind of in this like fun vibe, especially Hosea and Arthur and Dutch. I'd say they're all like really happy and upbeat. I don't really think there's the same funness of I think the number one here, but I still think this is an amazing camp to be at. I think it really shows like the camaraderie of everyone, especially when you have so many characters in chapter 2 and 3. I mean, basically every character is still alive in chapter 3, and they're all alive in chapter 2, and everyone can be at the camp in chapter 2. I think it really works out well, and it really works out to just build the camaraderie of everyone and showing that everyone's a family member. You can see Pearson cooking up his stew. You can see Miss Grimshaw taking care of the camp. I feel like it all works well in these 2 chapters. And I guess you can see that in every other chapter as well. But I feel like you can see the whole family ability of the Vanderlyn gang and like what Dutch kind of cultivated as his cult. You can kind of see it really in full display in chapter 3 and chapter 2, which we're going to go on to next. But I think this one also has to be an S tier with our number 1 camp. And in first place, we have to put Horseshoe Overlook. I just think Horseshoe Overlook wins because you can either just not have Micah here this whole time and have everyone except Micah in the camp, which is always a great time. It's before Arthur gets TB from Mr. Thomas Downs. And I feel like just the vibes in this camp are so much better. Everyone's kind of having fun. They're all kind of doing their own thing. And just the vibes are so good. Also, I think this has to be the best located camp in the entire game. Like, if this was the end of the game, the epilogue where you could go everywhere, I think it's the perfect center of the entire map. I feel like that works the best. And just you're right next to Valentine and you can do whatever in Valentine. I think Valentine's also one of the best towns. Check out my town tier list video for that. But I think Valentine's one of the best towns, and just being so close to it and being able to participate in those missions and just kind of going around the whole world is really fun. Also, I feel like there's a lot of interesting things, like Emerald Ranch is also close. I think the plains is also one of the easiest places to traverse. You see like Horseshoe Overlook. You're in Lemoyne, so the swamps are a little bit harder to traverse than the plains. I feel like just riding around the plains is pretty cool. There's just so many interesting things in New Hanover itself. I feel like New Hanover has to be one of the better places, especially that Great Plains area. And I think with Valentine there and it just being in the center of the map, the good vibes are up. I think this has to be the top camp out of them all. I think chapter 2 is also just when you're getting to that game. So it does have a little bit of nostalgia in itself, but I think it's just one of the most fun places to be, and Horseshoe Overlook, just the vibes are up. Everyone's having a good time. So I think it has to be in the number 1 spot, S tier. That concludes my whole Red Dead Redemption 2 camps tier list. I'm going to be posting tier lists like this every day, so please subscribe. If you did disagree with anything in this video, say it in the comments. We can have a nice little friendly debate and say why we thought our sides were better. Either way, though, if you guys did like this video, like it. I'm going to be having more of these tier lists every single day, so please subscribe to this channel.